My fascination for anime started with a visit to the studio of Hiromasa Ogura in 2007 in Tokyo. The first things I saw there were the original background illustrations for Ghost in the Shell. They were of outstanding painterly quality, and I was intrigued by the craftsmanship that went into these pieces. Ghost in the Shell and the others of Mamoru Oshii are all placed in a postmodern dystopian version of Tokyo, and I was impressed by the level of detail and the style of rendering the city, always with an influence of Blade Runner and cyberpunk aesthetics, but with a distinct Japanese style of it. At the time when Oshii started producing Ghost in the Shell, there was a certain style of anime being produced, and his claim to his artistic team was, we want a different look, we want a different perspective, we want something unusual. Oshii's style is that he uses each cut in a very long sequence. Ghost in the Shell consists of 682 cuts compared to, for example, Akira, which has more than 2,000 cuts. You can understand that each image will stay on screen for a really long time, and to keep it still, you have to work really, really precisely, and they did it quite well. I felt, especially in these meditation sequences where the plot would be calm and quiet and the protagonists just explore the city, that these scenes are actually about the backgrounds. The backgrounds are moving this whole thing forward. And I thought in this case the backgrounds are protagonists. Later, Oshii himself, he would describe his work in a way that the backgrounds are actually where the director makes his mark. The story would be a kind of superficial hook to get people into the world, but the expression of the director's vision can be broadly stated in the backgrounds. To create such a scene in animation, you need a team of outstanding artists. The guy who presents the photographs first, the guy who does the layout, the pencil drawings, of course the art director who executes the colored backgrounds. They all need to know really well what they are doing, because usually the character would be in front and the background is not really so important, but in these sequences the background speaks for itself. I think one of the outstanding qualities of Ghost in the Shell is the cinematic realism of depiction. And actually, Oshii was the first one to make a location scout part of the artistic team for an anime. It was very unusual. But the whole team went to Hong Kong in 1993-94 to check out the locations for Ghost in the Shell. There was Haruhi Koigami. He does black and white photography of sets, architecture, reference material. How do the buildings look? How do the trash bins look? How do the posters look? How does the humidity of the Hong Kong climate affect the buildings? And Ogura, the art director, would go on the same route, but he would just focus on the color. How do the neon signs project into the night? How do the car signs look? What are the traffic lights like? And later they would combine this into a version of Hong Kong that would be the movie set. Newport City, the set of Ghost in the Shell, has two areas, the new town and the old town. Old town is modeled after Hong Kong, more or less, and the new town is invented. It's an extrapolated version of what already existed at that time, but suddenly the skyscrapers would be 300 floors high instead of 40. So there are these two parts, but they have to come together into one set, and that was the task of the art department, to combine contrasting areas but within one city. This is the final production background drawn by Hiromasa Ogura. This is based almost exactly on a photograph taken by Higami. The photograph is black and white to not influence Ogura's sense of color, because he went on location scouting just to figure out the color atmosphere of Hong Kong. And he would take these photographs by himself and combine both his own photographic sketches with the set taken by Higami. Ogura went into a climate-controlled shop, and the camera would would cool down, and when he went back out into the humid air, the lens was foggy. And so the pictures he was taken at that time were blurred, but he liked the halos of the lights and put them back into his production background. So it's a fine example of synthesis, Higami's photograph, his photographs, and how it all comes together in his production background. This one is based on a layout by Takashi Watabe because it presents the new town, the new part of Newport City, and it doesn't exist in reality. So all he had was line drawings by Watabe, very detailed, great line drawings, but he still needed to figure out how does this building feel, what's the texture, how is it built? And he opted for kind of a glass surface and made it into this abstract glass concrete block on 3 levels, because it's a book cell, it's moving in front of the camera to create a sense of depth, and combining these levels of the old town and the new town, that's his greatest achievement, I think. After returning from the location scouting, they will go into the studio and paint image boards, a bit more detailed, richer in color, to present a vision of the set to the director. What Ogura painted was usually not good enough. They were not visually dense enough. Oshii always opted for a look which would be just overflow of information. That's his key word. We have to submerge the people into an overflow of information, the people who live in the set, but also the audience in the cinema. And therefore, they would use a lot of advertisement signs, a lot of references and trigger points for the eye to get a bit confused. This also means that on the art department side, you have to draw a lot, many details. You cannot just go away with some surfaces and some textures. You have to actually draw every single advertisement, every scratch in the wall, everything has to be done, and there's no way around it. So this is the image board for cut 240, a very iconic cut in the film. As you see, there are only a few advertisement signs, whereas in the final production background it would be a lot more material, and that's what Oshii wanted. He wanted a visually much more dense atmosphere. He said, yes, that's how it really looks, but that's not what we want. We want it much more dense, we want it much more overwhelming. The information layers have to be just stacked on each other. And the way they expressed it was they took several layers of advertisement over each other and created a kind of confusing, vibrant atmosphere. When the image boards had been approved in their final stage, the whole production would shift to the layout process. Layout means defining camera angles, movements of the camera, also movements of the character, and everything camera work related. After the layout, which was also part of Takashi Watabe's work because he would be the architect, so he knows how a building has to be framed in the camera, it would go to the art department again, and the final production backgrounds had to be drawn. So the art director and his team, they just have to start drawing a lot. Every one of these pieces demands much more detail than a regular TV anime show at that time. That's why they are outstanding pieces of art, executed on paper and photographed on film. Post-production done a bit digitally, but it's all hand-drawn on paper. For me, Ghost in the Shell is something to study. It's more like a text. And every time I watch it or I read it, I discover other elements, and I go back to an artist, talk to them, discover more material. It's not so easy to access this movie on a story level. It needed time to ripen, like a good wine. You have to watch it again and maybe again, and it gets better over time, which is a rare quality for anime. But it remained on top, it remained important because of this obscure hermetic quality, I think. There is something to decipher, and people who are into filmmaking and who are looking for inspiration, they will always find something in Ghost in the Shell. I think that's why it lives on until today.